Hello guys and welcome to this new video tutorial about our Yeoman React Generator. We saw in the previous video tutorials how to create components, scenes, how to connect them with a router, of course how to connect our components to a Redux global state manager, and how to create slices, actions and selectors with the state manager. Now the only piece that we miss to actually create a full functional single page application with our generator is of course to connect our front end with our backend. So first of all, now I will go and create maybe a new blank page. Okay, perfect. This will be the canvas where we will actually write maybe some components and connect our front end to some API calls with our backend. So in order to create a backend, I used our Restlessness framework. There is a playlist on our channel that you can watch with all the video tutorials about also this Restlessness framework. So I will not go through the details of this framework. I will just tell you that it is a framework based on serverless.com, and it has been created to actually develop, test and deploy Node.js REST APIs to AWS API Gateway plus Lambda Functions solution, serverless solution. So I just created here a project and I have some already APIs in place. The first one is the get users, that actually it will just retrieve a list of users, as we will see. So in order to create our first AJAX call, we will invoke gReact AJAX. Here the generator will prompt us for specifying the API route, that in this case is /users. And of course we should specify also an HTTP method, that in this case will be get. That's it. So let's go through the details of our AJAX call. The system basically works thanks to Axios library and Redux Sagas. So Axios is just one of the libraries like fetch or request that can create AJAX calls in JavaScript. Redux Saga instead, it is a system, actually a middleware for Redux, who allows us, thanks to generators functions, to create a synchronous flow. And this is really useful, especially when dealing with AJAX calls, because of course an API call is an asynchronous call that we do to a backend. And thanks to the system that we created, we are able to handle the state of our AJAX call that can be request in process, successful, failed, or even cancelled in a really smart and handy way. So if we go now through extra actions APIs, we can see that a new folder has been created with our get users AJAX call. If we open, we have an index file, and this is of course automatically created and scaffolded by our generator. So every AJAX call is based on this API builder function, this one, API action builder function, that actually gets some parameters and creates automatically for us some Redux action that we can use to actually call, to invoke our API call, our API AJAX call, and also to check its status. So let's see how it works. First of all, by default, the API is already populated with this placeholder, and also the routing here, it is already set up by our generator. So what we have to specify, it is just optionals parameters, like if it is a post, we can specify of course body parameters. If it is even a get, maybe we could have query parameters. And path parameters instead, as we will see later, they are automatically handled by the generator. So let's start maybe with an example without any parameters. So we can go back to our users page. Here we will import our dispatcher. and we can create a use effect in a way that every time we load the user's page, we actually invoke this API AJAX call. To actually invoke the API call, we have to dispatch in actions. As you can see, there is already the hint get users inside actions because of how the generator handled it. So APIs, there is index, we can remove this placeholder. It is actually exporting our action from the get users folder. Extra actions is also exporting all these APIs. So if we go in our slices index file, we can see that here, the very first import, it is all these extra actions that are automatically exported inside the actions object that is also exported here from our Redux store index file. So by just importing actions, we are able to retrieve all the action of our Redux store, including the extra actions. This getUser is not just a Redux action, but it is actually a group of them. So as you can see, we have success, request, fail, cancel, and also this API that is actually a string. So what we want to call to actually invoke our API call, it is request. By default, we can pass an argument object. In this case, we have no parameter, so the object should be empty. We can save. Now, as you can see, we have already an error. So if we refresh the page, we can see that automatically, by just invoking this action, our Redux Saga, it is handling for us the Axios API call. So if we go here also in Redux, we can see that here we are actually invoking our API, and here the API failed, with the message limit is a required field. Why it is happening this? So let's go back to our actual backend and see how it works. In our backend, as you can see here again, we have a limit variable that should be in the query string parameters that is required, and it should be an integer number, a number that we are not passing. So of course the backend is answering with an error message, and automatically by our application, this error message is also shown in the snack bar. So also the error handling, it is already and automatically linked to our system. If you want to go and check how this is happening, you can open this feedback sagas, and you can see that here there is an AJAX fail feedback saga that is retrieving all the AJAX fails, and it sets a feedback whenever this happens. So how we can fix our API to actually make it work? Let's go back to our get users, and now we know that we should specify a limit number. So we can say here limit, and here we can specify query, and we can pass actually like this, limit params limit. Now we can save. If we go back to the application, now of course TypeScript is telling us that there is a property limit that we are not passing. So the fact that we are putting here this limit, it helps us also for refactoring, but to not forget to put and to use the required parameters when we invoke our API calls. So if we go back here, we will find the error, and now we can specify our limit. Of course, TypeScript is also suggesting for us, and we can say 30. Now, if we go back here, we can see that our get request is already dispatched, and automatically the Redux Saga is dispatching also other actions, a set API loading that we will check soon what is it, but also a get success. If we go inside the action, we can see the payload that is 200, so success. There is also a data object that we will see in a few minutes, and also prepare params that are actually the params we used at the request time that can be useful to retrieve even in the success. So now that we know that our API is working fine, we should tell our application which kind of data it has been returned. So first of all, we will create a model. The model name will be user. And our generator created for us this template. So now we can tell what the user interface look like. And we know from here that we are returning users object that are exactly like this. So we can actually copy the same interface we are using on the backend, we can copy and paste on our front end. Here we have also a class that is implementing this interface and that we can enhance with, of course, some get methods, for example, but we will see this later. What we need right now is this user interface to describe actually this users list objects that we are receiving from our API. So here we can populate this get users response data with the users iUser array. We can import, of course, our interface like this. So now we will see the potentiality of this. Indeed, now we can go here. We still didn't create a slice to handle our users, so I will do it right now. So first of all, I want to save in our new user slice the list of all the users. And of course, there will be interface user array as well. Second of all, I want to go to our index file and I want to initialize this list with an empty array. And now we are finally ready to connect our Redux store with the result of our API calls. So we can go here, we can say extra reducers, builder. Since the actions already exist, because it is our API builder who is building them for us, we don't have to create new actions here. We should use those one. And of course, now we need to use extra reducers for these extra actions. So this builder helps us. It is, of course, a functionality of a Redux toolkit that helps us to add these kind of cases, these extra reducers. So here we should specify the type of our action. So we will take it extra actions, get users, success, and it accepts a second callback, like this. This reducer takes a state and the action. So now we can set in our state list action, payload, data, users. So in this way, our action, it is populated with the data that we specified, and thanks to the API builder, we already know that these users, it is the exact same type that we specified in our get users response data. So we cannot do mistake when assigning also these properties to our store. Okay, now we can save it. We can open the selectors of this slice and we can add a new selector. But first I will add our reducer to our list that I forgot to do. Like this. And now finally I can connect again my users page with this list. Now I will use our selector. grab our users list and I will pass it in our index page. So now I can map our users. And for example, I can list their names. If I go back in our application, actually we have the error that cannot read property map of undefined, so users is undefined. Why our users is undefined? Because of our persist, when we actually created the first time our Redux store, user didn't contain a list. So now when we are actually retrieving it from the store, the users list, the list object array is not defined, so we have this error that we can fix it quick with this check. So if we go back now to our application, we will see that our API is successful and we can see the list of our user. One it is string, one it is my name. This is what it is written in the database in this exactly moment, so everything were fine. If we want to add to this also the age, of course we can go here. Can put also the age and everything will work just as fine. Okay, so what if we want actually to create a new user? So let's go back to our backend because we have actually a post users API that works in this way. It accepts a payload validation, a payload with a name and an age. That's it. And it returns us the new created user. So let's go back to our front end and let's create a new AJAX call. The path route is always users, but the method in this case it is post. So let's create a minimum UI for our form. Now we can create the state and managing by hand the onChange event and the form dispatch, or we can use the React form hook. So first of all, let's install it, React hook form. And now we can import its hook. We should pass an object type of our form, so we will say, actually we can use our interface, because the data of the form will be actually the data of our user, so a name and an age. Now we just have to pass this register to our text fields. Specify a name to understand which kind of data we are actually registering. And then we define a form submit. Handle submit actually it is in charge from our use form to retrieve the data when we want to use it. So it accepts data that here we can call user. As you can see here, user age and name. So TypeScript helps us, and thanks to the fact that we specified here the interface when we declared our use form. So our user is ready, so we can dispatch it. Actions, post users, request. And now we can specify our user object. We can go here now in the user params. We can say that our post user params, they should accept actually a string name and an age number. Once we declare our attributes, of course, we want also to pass it. We can do it with body, name, and age, like this. So now we can go back to our UI. We can create a new user, and as you can see here, our post was successful. Now if we try to reload our page, we will have our new user. So let's improve a little bit the user experience of our create form by defining a disable boolean, or better, is creating user boolean, because our AJAX slice with its sagas and actions created, it comes also with a selector that is get AJAX is loading by API. So this function accepts actually a parameter that is the API name that we want to check. So in this case, post user.api. And whenever there is an AJAX call, so a post user's AJAX call in progress, this is creating user will be true. Otherwise, it will be false. So we can pass this value here, and we can use this boolean to control our form. For example, we can say that the button is disabled when there is an AJAX call already in progress. We can even disable our text fields. In this way, we will avoid our user to manipulate the data or to create other users before the first one or the current one is still in progress. So if we go back here, we can give a refresh. As you can see, for just even less than a second, our fields were disabled. Now we have an error because the age 12 is not acceptable from our system. So like this, it's successful. So how we can check if everything is working? We can see in a glance that it is, but we can use Redux to actually exploit the travel in the history functionality. So if we can go here, we can go to request. Here we can see that the AJAX set API loading, it puts this is loading API users post in true. So if we jump just here, we can see that in this moment, this action post successful triggers, but in this exactly moment, in our AJAX is loading, API users post the flag boolean, it is true. Indeed, our UI here, it is just disabled. So if we go one step further, now after the post success, this set API loading action automatically triggered from our Redux Saga puts back to false the fact that the API it is not in progress, because we actually have a result, success, cancel or fail that it is, and now our fields becomes again usable. So we covered also this post. And what about if we want to modify a user already created? So we can do that by calling the put users by user ID API that we already created during our Restlessness video tutorials. So this API actually accepts a limit number just for testing purpose, but more important, a payload with a new name and a user ID that is an object ID, because these users have been saved with MongoDB. So let's go back to our interface and let's create this API with a path parameter inside. In this case, the API route, it is not users anymore, but we want a parameter like this. Users, curly brackets, user ID. And it is a put method. That's it. Our AJAX call has been created. If we go to extra actions, APIs, put users by user ID. Now, not only we have our AJAX call already created with the path and everything, but since our generator already knows that strings in curly brackets are parameters, it already created for us a user ID string parameter, and he also populated it in our path. So in this way, we can just specify a user ID and it works like a charm. So now let's do this in our form. To be a little bit faster, I will just modify our create user form with update user. And here I just need to save which user I'm going to update. So I will create a user state actually. And now for every users that I have in my list, I will return an array of functions. Of course, TypeScript is telling us that this underscore ID is not a property of our users. Indeed, it is present in our objects because the backend is retrieving it like this, but we didn't actually define in our model. So let's go and fix it. Now we know that our user interface contains also a string ID. It also contains a created, but we don't need it right now. Now, for every user, we want to add, maybe we want to, yes, we can add actually a button. Take our user ID and print it here. So we know which user ID we are actually going to modify. So let's go back to our front end. We can click edit. As you can see, by clicking on the button, we are actually modifying this element. So for example, let's modify this string. So what we want to do here is to go back to our hook file, and now we should change, of course, this dispatch. So let's say put users by user ID. Now this object doesn't work anymore, so we have to specify user ID, and a name. The name, we will take it from our form, like this. Of course, here maybe we want to fix our form by specifying that now we will just require a string name. Here we still have an error because we didn't specify this payload in our put users. So we know that there is a user ID path parameters, but we should tell also our API that there is a name payload. Like this. Here we can add also our user ID to the dependencies. Now we can modify this string as we said. And again, we have limit is a required field because, as we told before, we have this limit number that just now for testing purpose we can tell that this is not required but an optional. So we don't have to change our front end actually. And if we go back and we update our user, here you can see that our user is actually been updated. Let's see again in our Redux history. So let's modify Matteo with Vincenzo. This is our request and this is also the success. Now, of course, we can do a lot of things. We can also take this object and we can update live our Matteo instead of have to refresh it to check it to see the updated version. So let's do it. Let's go back to our slices. User. In our index file, we will add a new case. Builder add case, extra actions, put users by ID this time. in success state action. And now we should actually modify this element of the list. So we can do state list. We can actually map our users. We can go to check our users. So the only thing that we are missing in our API, it is actually the response data that we didn't specify. So we know that our response data, it will be a user. Like this. So we can go back here, and now we will find our user with its ID. So if the user ID, it is the one that we actually modified, let's replace this user in the list with the new one. Otherwise, we will just return our user, original user. So we can update it. We can also switch now our boolean is creating user with is updating actually. And we should check also the right API like this. All right, let's go back, and now if everything works, our user here should be updated in real time. That's it. As you can see here, at the success, our list, the first element has been changed from Vincenzo to Paolo, and if you want to modify something like this, it will work also for other elements in the array. So, in this video tutorial, we saw how to create AJAX calls, how to connect them with our backend, and how to link them, of course, to our Redux slice, to our Redux state manager. So, we saw how to create also some extra reducer with the builder tool that Redux Toolkit exposed for us in order to manage these extra actions. And we saw also how to retrieve the data with our selector. So now we have all the elements to create a beautiful UI and also to connect this UI with a backend. And maybe the really last thing that we still want to manage is some kind of authentication. So maybe in the next video tutorial we will see how to integrate our application with some authentication system that can be a custom JWT authentication token, or we can use the AWS Cognito service that will simplify a lot. And we also created a Cognito command for our generator to actually scaffold all the actions and all the libraries needed to connect our front end already with AWS Cognito.